for example, in something like Reddit, you might only be able to load up, say, 25 articles at a time on a page, and then if you want to go on a big downvote patrol on some other user, how long will it take you to actually downvote you have to actually individually click every single downvote icon to get through, right? So there's at least a barrier to,
if you go to someone's user page and click downvote, it actually won't affect it because it's to stop bots.
Exactly, right? So yeah, so they've introduced a barrier.
We just get a bot.
Things ways to protect
has to go into it.
Yeah.
Spare the group from scale. Conversations require two-way participation. Right? If you have too many users, you have too much going on, right? You're going to be overwhelmed, right? People need to form two-way connections within the system. And unfortunately, as your social network grows in size, this goes in power of 2. Right? So it means that for every user coming in, you're growing the number of connections in the system at a power rate. So it's an interesting one, say, from something like Twitter. And I do a bit of analysis of Twitter, and I can tell you a lot of what's on Twitter is absolute rubbish. Right? Has anyone ever spent any time just looking at the fire hose? Right? The actual front page of Twitter, not the page that you've subscribed to follow particular other Twitter users. I'm talking about the real feed of Twitter. Just click all and watch it. Right? It is mostly absolute trash. Right? There is a lot of bad tweets that are posted every second of every day. Right? So I don't want to see that. Right? And so Twitter allows you to follow other people to try and filter out the conversations that you're interested in taking place. Now, it was interesting with Twitter early on, they allowed you to follow and retweet other people. Right? But what was the one thing that was developed that enabled even more of this particular behavior? And it wasn't developed by Twitter, it was developed by users who adopted into Twitter. Yeah. Yeah. Hashtags, right? Yeah. So hashtags are really interesting because it was a set of users, as I said, that kind of developed it. And they brought it across from things like IRC chat, where this was already kind of a commonplace thing to do. And the whole idea behind a hashtag was a way to actually filter out conversations around a topic. So if I'm interested in politics in Australia, I might look at the hashtag Auspol. And if I want to make a contribution to an audience on Twitter that's also interested in that, I'll hashtag my tweets with Auspol to be part of that conversation. Now, Instagram have adopted this as well with their photos. So if I'm interested in looking at particular photos, I'll search via the hashtag. Right? What it's a way to do is to actually spare the group from scale. And so supporting those activities, that hashtagging, helps users deal with scale. Right? So it was really interesting. When Twitter saw this happening, they thought, oh, actually, this is really clever, and now let's support it. So within a lot of their functionality, you can actually now search directly on hashtags and then give ideas of trending topics and hashtags within their homepage. Right? So they've actively sort of like adopted and now kind of treated it as a native functionality within the system. But it's interesting, it's something that came from the user base. So once again, the users kind of telling the overlords what they want to do. All right, so all this boils down to needing to understand groups, right? You really need to understand how groups of people operate. Social psychology and sociology have large established literatures on this, about understanding groups, be that small groups, performance of large groups, how leadership plays a role in all of this, right? So for example, on, say, I get an example of Twitter, we see celebrities and those, when I say celebrity, I just mean movie stars and singers and such, also talking about politicians, world leaders, tech professionals, people who have these very, very large followings. And they kind of provide a bit of a thought leadership in this space. They set a lot of the agendas on social media. They're the ones who popularize whatever viral campaign it might be this week. Last week it might have been Coney. This week it's the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? And so, yeah, this leadership is coming from this established power user base who then allow, and that kind of sets the agenda of the entire social network. And in all of that, there's conformity, consensus, and norms. Right? So people are slaves to a lot of that and conform to what they see as the practice of the time. Right? So yeah, I'm gonna, if I get nominated in one of those challenges, I better partake because otherwise I'm not, right? Don't value research or something like that. Right? So there's a lot of that consensus building within this, right? And this is all part of, this is all psychology 101, right, we're talking about. And within this, then you have things like group polarization, risky shift, and group right? So if you've ever seen one of the witch hunts happen on, say, a site like Reddit, where there's a bombing, and all of a sudden they get a picture, and they think the picture is the person who's kind of planted the bomb, and all of a sudden you've got that person's address, and their social security number, and there's people in real life going around to track them out and keep them in the street. All of a sudden it's kind of like, hey, hang on a second, right? What's kind of really happening? Right? So all this happening is facilitated by the social software platforms that we create. Right? So you have to be careful about that as well. All right, in this, and I will skip through this now. There is a whole art and science behind analyzing social networks, and a lot of people have done a lot of work on trying to understand how ties are formed within networks, and there's a lot of terms that you can use to analyze these networks as well. So we use things like degree centrality, betweenness, and closeness, and these are all used to model. So for example, Heather here is a connector. Heather connects this densely connected network here to these outliers like Jay. Right? Now, if Heather was cut out of there, we actually have this group, this group here. Right? And in looking at something like that, I could probably posit that this group here are all associates, maybe school friends, work friends, or something like that. Heather is a friend who may have travelled recently and picked up a friend Ike through travel, who's also connected to Jane over here. Right? And that's often how we form. And what we talk about is we talk about these as being short-range connections and these as long-range connections. Right? And all this means is when you actually scale this up to a whole network, you end up with a very, very interesting dynamic within that network. Now, there's been a lot of different social network sites over history since '97. When this kind of list began, and it stops at 2006. And obviously, a lot's kind of happened in the last almost 10 years, and it almost gets a bit too big for this particular infographic from that point because it seems like there's another site opening up every second these days. But it's interesting, and I guess past a line down the list. At some of the ones, and how early they've been around for. So, for example, who's on LinkedIn? Yeah, you will be by the time you graduate, right? That's when I get all the requests, right? When we're all kind of finished. You're like, oh, yeah, grab that guy. But yeah, MySpace, rest in peace. Right, Capster, pretty awesome too. Right. So yeah. What we saw with that was that, there was this kind of slow build-up, and then all of a sudden, there's this explosion that happens through here. That's where you
my Bible was the best page. I had I would change my theme every 3 days.
Facebook, Harvard Early, Facebook there, the same time as Flickr. I wonder if this is too early for Delicious. I thought Delicious was around here.
Delicious is like a link sharing.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a heap out there. So yeah, we can't talk about all this social software and not talk about Sam Milgram's famous experiment. He did this what we call the small world study, right? And it's sometimes referred to as a 6 degrees of separation study. And what he did was he asked starters, supposedly randomly chosen. We've seen it since past post-analysis of it. They weren't chosen at random. They were heavily biased. that he chose to initially start this experiment. And then they were asked to send a folder through the mail to a target person, right? And the idea was they had to use their established social networks to direct a package through the mail to that end person. And each jump that they sent the mail, they counted that as a degree of separation, right? Eventually, the post found its way to the end or didn't find its way at all. And he did a statistical analysis on this and found that on average there was 6 degrees of separation between an initiator and a destination node. So yeah, so that was kind of interesting, showing like how connected are we really?